We talked about in these past 2 days and these last presentations of different responsibilities for facility management, like optimizing portfolios, the challenges, and now comes a part that's equally important, which is maintenance. But even if it's important, it's not the attractive or sexy part of the business. Usually, we receive recognition because we built some offices and they were very nice, but they never complement, for example, the waterproofness of the building. But it's very important to have a good strategy in terms of maintenance, not only because of the adequate use of the budget, but so that the final user can adequate this to their core business. So what I'm going to do is present and share with you the creation of maintenance strategy. Well, we're talking about a company, Federal Express, which is an international company. They bought a national Mexican company, which had no maintenance plan. And how, from having a facility management department where we focused on projects, suddenly, because of the necessities of the business, we also had to focus on maintenance. And this is what, in 15 minutes, I'll try to share with you. I'm going to divide it in 3 parts: planning, implementation and control, and recommendations. When we see recommendations, there are 3 slides, and we can all have dinner. So when we get there, you'll know that I'm almost done. So the part of planning. It's very important to understand the status quo, where we are, so we can then define the reach of what we want to do. Like I said, a multinational company, we have 45 installations, multi-pack. The national company, we have 421 installations. We'll have a total of 466 installations, so the portfolio increases tenfold. Maintenance was basically responsibility of the user, but in reality, they were more focused that the packages were done on time. So in practice, we had more corrective maintenance, which resulted in larger costs. The breakdown of those 466 is we have 380 retail or sales points and 81 medium installations and 5 large installations, especially in we have them in airports for international transfers. We have to prepare the licitation document. We invited 34 companies, but only 14 of those 34 really participated. And 11, the difference is that the companies were focused on electromechanic maintenance, which were also responsible. But we'll focus this more on real estate maintenance. Our first intention was to have a company that provided a service at a national level. But we're surprised to see that of those 14, only 2 had national reach. And additionally, this meant monthly equation. When we analyzed results, we saw that the best proposals were 65% larger than the budget that we had. So our hope of having a national company wasn't going to work because the budget we had wasn't going to be enough. So we concluded that this plan of only having monthly rates had to be complemented with a scheme per event. And we would have to pay in different places, but to reduce costs, it wouldn't be in all locations. We had to complement them with the user should let us know what they need so that we can do it on an event per event basis. So that was a proposal we had, that the responsibility of maintenance, obviously with budget, should go over to the facility management team because we do properties, also rent negotiations, everything inside this department. Budgets. The budget was the historical quantity that we'd been managing. And we were going to have 3 maintenance specialists, 3 facility managers that were going to be responsible to evaluate all the 3 districts in which we had Mexico divided. And we were going to start in June 2012. And after all this analysis, the proposal was to start with June 2012, basically 2 years ago. With what I told you, 2 models. In retail, it was a trimestral basis. In medians, it was going to be on a monthly. And in the large locations, we're going to have someone on location, because we decided that that part is crucial, because there can be no failures, because if there's a error there in retail, for example, it doesn't have that importance, but we had to prioritize. And the second model is, for example, what we were talking about on an eventual basis. And this internal proposal, we wanted to reinforce our added value for facility managers, because there was a resistance on the part of users to give us this budget or to release this responsibility. Because even if they didn't do it, they didn't want to release that responsibility. So we had to emphasize the profits that we were going to provide. On this slide that you can see, I don't have to convince you of the aggregate value that we as facility managers provide as maintenance, as responsible for maintenance. So I'm going to basically operational continuity, evaluation of execution, minimizing corrective maintenance. Those are the most important things. Additionally, the benefits in the budget administration, because users, I have a little bit more than 15 minutes. The benefits in budget management, having these 3 specialists that were focusing on evaluating this aspect, they were going to give the control of each cent. We could see where it was being spent. And this was something that operatives weren't doing. There was absolutely no control of what had been spent. We didn't know where we had spent our money. So when we presented this proposal, that's when it got accepted. And in June 2012, our facilities department, they take the responsibility of maintenance. This is the first part. The second part is implementation and control processes. If I had seen this slide on the first day we were going to implement, would have been saved a lot of headaches, but we didn't have it. So throughout the year, we realized that this slide was the logical process, because it will sound very simple, but we didn't have this. And we realized what we had to do. And I'm going to explain each step in the process, because you're going to see in the results the difference between how a good process makes the differences in response time and preventive maintenance steps that we can take. We're basically talking about the 2 models, the eventual and the monthly one. The first 3 steps are the same in both cases. The first step is for the user, who will send an application to the facility manager. And there are 10 formats that are part of this process. These 10 formats depend on each company. It depends on how their administrative process is, if it's too bureaucratic or not. But we need to see the abilities from start to finish of all steps. First of all, for following our activities or our control. We're not going to talk in detail about each step, but I will talk about the important information in each one. So in a job application, your, the ID of which installation we're talking, where it's located, who is applying, and obviously the address of that application. That's the first document with which we start the first step, be it eventual or in a monthly. In the case of monthly payments, there's are certain activities that could be included in this cost. So if the user demanded it, we could see the difference. And then we could see if it was eventual or not. Step 2 is when the facility manager classifies that application fundamented on the specialty and assigns it to a provider. This is the format. In this format, you can see the provider, also the ID that I was talking about before, the state, the person who's applying, the assignation date, the application, and the ticket. That information will be throughout the whole process that I was talking about. This is what really makes a difference. Once we do this job of classifying, talking about how important communication is, facility manager, what he does is send an email to the internal client who applied for this requirement, and also to the provider. Both will be sent the information. And as you can see here, this is the ticket number. And in the provider part, we also have the application attached. And something that might seem minor, we also have included in the title the ticket number. So this way we organize from the first point all the information so that at the end, with many tickets, we have this better organized and better controlled. We come back. Now that we have those 3 steps covered, we divide the process in 2, be it eventual or monthly. If it's eventual, we can see if it's critical or not. A critical thing can be a hurricane or an earthquake. There was an earthquake yesterday in Mexico. Fortunately, there were no damages. But if there had been some damages, that's something critical that needs to be resolved immediately. So if it's critical, we go to the provider who executes with the facility manager's approval. The provider doesn't act on his own. The facility manager is always to approve, because if not, we lose control of the budget. In this case, approval is basically immediate because it's a critical thing. Once you have the approval, we go to the step where the facility manager updates the budget in the ticket database, which is this one. Here you can see the slide that we saw before, but we have 3 more columns, those at the end. That's where we see the billing number and the status. This allows us with a traceability of each step. Once the slide is updated, the provider gives in the reports with that you can see here. This format helps us to verify the before and after of the work done. We see the billing number, the ID, and with this information, we can see the work that's being done at the same time that we're controlling. The facility manager goes to different places to verify different jobs. He's not going to receive all of them because it would be too much and too many trips. So the provider sends this format with the pictures, and additionally it sends another document which would be the bill. This is the document. As you can see in this bill, there's the famous billing number, and also there's an additional number which is the folio, the fiscal folio. And this is something for that has to do with governmental purposes, because the government needs this number. And this gives us traceability for payment control. If we don't pay the provider in time, it becomes complicated to if the cash flow isn't in place. We have the billing number, the folio, and as you can see below, the ticket number. Once again, this way, I insist, we have in each document the information that we need to trace any step. I come back to the slide. The provider executes with the facility manager's approval. The facility manager updates the budget, and once it's updated, the provider gives in the report that I showed you with the bill. Now that we have this information, the facility manager, and this point that you can see, approves and processes the bill for payment. And like we have many different administrative steps, we have to elaborate this other document, which is an internal document that also has, as you can see, the folio number that I talked about before. And here you can see the ticket number and also the ID, which is here in the upper part. And with this document, this which we prepare for the accounting department and internal processes, this will always depend on each company, how they do the payment process. We come back to the slide, and now that we have this application sent to the accounting department, this other format comes in, and this is really the one that lets us sleep at night when one in terms of accountability. This is where all the locations, the dates in the company, the billing number, the description of what was done, and the amount that was paid. And we also have the tax, sales tax, and the total. This document is filled in each month, and the total amount should be equal or inferior to the budget we dispose of. That way we can control our approved budget compared to what the real budget was. This control is done by district for each zone that we own. With this information, we can always say the description, what was billed, how many pesos in each district. So with this, we are covered because we also have the support information, which are the formats with the pictures and the bills. So everything is related, and there will be no gap in the process, or it will be minimized. And once again, the last step in this process to be able to pay is this table. This table was done because once we would give our information to the accounting department, some things would get lost, or maybe accounting would lose some bills. So what we did was put in the billing number and the folio number, and we didn't need the ticket ID because we already closed that part. And as you can see here, we have a seal from accounting, and that way we can prove that it's been received. And if that seal isn't there, that's a control. And with that control, we can also ask the provider to be paid in time. This way, the cycle is closed from what's the start of the requirement until the payment phase. I come back. This is the part of an eventual thing. And if it's critical, the provider, the facility manager approved the provider. The budget would be updated. The provider would give in the report. Facility manager updates, approves, and the bills, and it then registers the costs. So we finally can have that table for accounting. But if it's not critical, the provider has to send the budget to the facility manager if it's not critical. And here's another decision-making point. If it's less than $5,000, the provider executes it and the facility manager approves it, because we have to comply with internal policies. And if the quantity is larger than $5,000, we need to have other budgets to be able to compare and see that it's a fair price. So when the facility manager receives the budgets and revises them, he will approve the most adequate budget. Once it's approved, it re-enters this flow that I was talking about, this cycle. And with this, both options for an eventual case will be closed. And if it's instead of an eventual case, it's if the cost is $115 or less, which in euros is it's not too much. If it's less than that, the provider executes it, and after executing it, I'm sorry, I was wrong here. If the cost is, if it's not less, the provider will send the budget to the facility manager for its approval. I will show you now another example where you can see the number. And here, one of the advantages that we were talking about for the facility manager is that with experience that he has, he can more or less know if the cost is adequate or if it's more or less in line with other examples. And a user would have it much more complicated to verify this. And once the budget is here, revised by the facility manager approves it, the provider executes it, the provider gives in a monthly report, which is a different document from the eventual one, because it has all the jobs that were realized in that month. And once more, we see the location and the month that we were realizing these jobs. And this is the monthly cost that we pay to a provider. It's a fixed monthly payment. It's the same cost that you pay each month for certain jobs. If those jobs are more than the amount that was negotiated, that's why the facility manager has to approve it. Okay. I come back to the slide. So, lastly, in the monthly payment, if the cost is larger than $115, it needs to be approved, and if it's less, it gets immediately approved. The facility manager reviews it, and has to approve it, and also approve the bill, register the costs, and the final accounting bill. This process, what it has done is to trace activities and budget in monthly terms. Here are some pictures, the before and after, when we took over maintenance. You can see what users wouldn't do before, which would be waterproofing installations, and also the status of tickets. We can see here in year 1, the percentage of tickets that were closed in that same month was only 36%. 64% of the tickets were open for more than a month, because we were basically extinguishing fires. And the second year, with this process implemented, we got up to 81% of closed tickets, with only 19% that were still open. Doesn't mean that they were open for the whole year, but it was important that they were in the same month. Additionally, what we did was to graph the corrective versus preventive maintenance that we were going to do. We said that we were going to change the culture from corrective to preventive maintenance. In the first year, we only had 10% of preventive maintenance. The second year, it was 40%. And our projection for 2 years hence is about 80% of preventive measures. If I had to start with a maintenance strategy from zero, what would I avoid? First of all, I would try to reduce the amount of providers to 1 or 2. We need to have as many as possible. We cannot allow direct instructions from the user to the provider because it causes confusion. If the user directly tells the provider what to do, you lose control of the budget. It's very complex. The third point is a service of only reports or monthly payments isn't recommended. It has to be more or less balanced. And we have to avoid to have more than one contact point per provider for evaluation. So only one person per provider. And with that, that should be enough. And then you internally can see if it works out. Those are the things that we wouldn't do again. And what would you do? We would have a large variety of regional and local providers to assign one single contact point per installation for a job application, to have conferences with users, between users and management to inform advances and debate priorities. The fact that the user knows that we're taking into account their priorities makes a big difference. Even if we're working on resolving it, the fact that they know that we're working on it makes them a lot more, they're reassured that we're working on it. Also, standardizing processes with providers for attention to job applications and billing. They were used to, each one will do it with their logo, but they all have to have the information that we need. Also, to ensure monthly reports, initiate implementation focusing on priorities with high impact, and also using these billing tables so we can trace the payments. So that way we can also have results in the service. To ensure traceability, assigning a ticket number to each application. And finally, visiting locations to evaluate the provider's work. All these recommendations depend on the size of your business, depend on the country where you're located, depends on the number of administrative procedures that you have. But there's one recommendation that's useful anywhere. Always give people more than they expect. It's very important to always take into account that we as facility managers, we are an area that's staff, we're support department, we're useful for others. Well, we have to have this service attitude, which will make the difference with the final user's experience with our client, be it internal or external. Sometimes we forget about it because we as facility managers are always going to support a company that has its core. So we have to have that, always keep that in mind, that we are serving others. We can make that difference that they are looking for. And finally, I would like to wish you a lot of success and for your role as facility managers, or for those of you who have a lot of experience also, and that you enjoy that role and everything it implies. And if I can help you with anything, I'll be very glad to. Thank you.